Hell, it's about time.
The Starcraft miniatures game is here and I'm so excited because I'm a lifelong fan and player of Starcraft. I spent so many years as a young teenager playing Starcraft and then in college years playing Starcraft 2. Now Archon have sent us this game, but this video is actually not sponsored because they sent us the box for a battle report that we're doing next week. But we thought if we're painting all the miniatures for a box game, we may as well do a video on that as well. So that's this video, but we do have a little bit more license to share our thoughts. Now we were so excited about this that I've been talking to Archon for months, and unfortunately our box kind of got delayed in shipping. So we are slightly late to the party, but we're so excited to share it with you. We're going to be painting every miniature in the box. So let's check it out. So this is the launch box, the founder's edition of the Starcraft tabletop miniatures game. And that is the last time I'm saying that in this video because it is a mouthful. I'm just going to call it the Starcraft minis game. And the box contains a full force, about 1,000 points of Zerg in their purple sprues, and a full force of about 1,000 points of Terran in their blue sprues, which have a really nice metallic-y sheen through them, which actually looks pretty cool when you build them. There are clear acrylic sprues in various colors, and this allows you to do special effects on your models, but it also incorporates some other parts of models like fins and wings that you might want to leave parts of transparent. It's actually pretty cool that they do this. The box also contains terrain and a playmat, as well as the usual expected things like dice, instructions, data cards, all of that stuff to make it a very comprehensive launch box. The price point for the launch box, however, is approaching the same price as the big Games Workshop edition launch boxes, which I don't think is a huge problem in this economy. I think that's fine, but certainly this is going to be an investment, and whether it's worth it for you to make that investment is really up to how much you love Starcraft and how much you like the look of the quality of these minis. As I said, we are doing a sponsored battle report next week, and we have already recorded that, so I will give you a sneak peek of my opinions. I actually think for a first edition of a game, it plays pretty well, and my appraisal is with features such as alternate activation and some novel mechanics that feel a little bit like you're playing the Starcraft video game, which is really cool. But the focus of this video is going to be building and painting all of these minis for that battle report, so let's get to it.
All right, this is the moment that I'm always excited for, looking at new kits, new plastic sprues, to see how they're laid out, what the quality of the plastic is like, and to see how well they go together, because that's kind of important to a lot of people who are going to build their miniatures. So let's have a look. So first of all, I see that the sprues are color-coded to the factions, which firstly is quite nice. It means that, you know, if painting isn't your thing, you don't have to paint them at all. You can just play them as is. Player 1 color and player 2 color, solved. However, that's not me, and I definitely want to paint these up. In terms of the actual models, it seems that there's kind of a duplicate of each pose, but then you have some options for like heads and having the visors on or not, having a bayonet. So you can mix them up a little bit. They don't seem quite as copy-pasted as some other war games. Well, the instructions have me starting with the head and the torso, specifically in that arrangement, because the head is so buried inside the big astronaut canopy here that it's kind of just one piece. So after getting used to the parts once, I fell into quite a good rhythm of just assembling all of these. And then for a final bit of flair, I decided to put visors onto about 60% of these guys. They all do the protagonist thing where they flick their visor up in the middle of combat, but for a bit of variety and the fact that I actually really like their sort of NASA visors, I'm going to have a fair bunch of them with it. Gluing them in because I actually want to paint them. I'm not going to keep them in this sort of translucent plastic, which is really cool that it provides you with the option to do that sort of thing. Again, you get that extra bit of color if you're not going to paint them at all, but I find that despite the fact that they are really quite a nice color, once you put it in somewhere and it's not lit from within or something, it's just going to look a bit murky. It's going to lose some of its color. So I'm going to put that color in later with paint. They also have the little slots for the pistols and grenades, and they actually match up to the contours of the body. You can actually see where they should go, which isn't always the way, so hooray for that as well. I also added some crystals to the bases, and I elected to not put in the shooting effects, the flaming gun flares, I guess, coming out of the barrels, which again is a really sweet option that you have this as base in the kit. So that was the standard Marines done, your sort of cheese and chalk here. Now I'm going to move on to these bombard lads, who are huge, absolutely massive. I'm sort of doing some mental gymnastics trying to work out where the people fit inside these. It's sort of a insert Osama bin Laden hiding in the cavity here meme. Something that I really did like is that you have an option of 3 arm poses for each of their arms across both of the models, which is really nice. You end up with, you know, a bunch of spare parts, but you have the option to pose them how you want. Which with most models, they'll just be like, just give them like a sheer cut on the arms, and then you sort of like, you know, pose them like this. But of course they've got cables on them, right? And you want those to match up well, which is dubious on some kits. But if you've got structured set poses in multiple angles, then you know exactly where the cables need to go. So that's awesome. I like that. The medics are also pretty similar to the standard Marines, except they've got a couple more glowy bits and additions here. Namely, they've got their medic spraying mist goop stuff. And then of course on their shield, they've got the big sort of Swiss cross medic universal symbol, which is all very cool and makes a really easily identifiable silhouette to mark these out from the rest of the models. Having just built all these, I think that the quality of the plastics is actually really nice. It's kind of a soft plastic, hard enough that it takes a bit of effort to do anything to the plastic, but if you're just removing lines and these sprue gates, then they come away really, really easily. So, ooh, that's the other thing. Mold lines, basically no mold lines. These are really well made and really good. I will say that removing mold lines from the front of convex leg armor is, if you've built one Space Marine, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So it's a necessary evil, I think. And then to finish it off, I'm gonna go over all of the models that I just assembled with some texture paste on the bases to get that done and dry, allowing the glue to finalize and for the bases to set. This is personal preference. I like to assemble the entirety of the base before I paint it rather than at the very end. I just find it easier and a bit less stressful than trying to poke your wet brown mud goop in between the legs of something that you just spent a lot of time painting and, you know, keeping clean. Anyway, now they're all done, I think it's time to see what Jen is up to with building the Zerg.
So I am in charge of building up all of the Zerg for this kit, and there's a lot of them, kind of like your Tyranids or your other aliens of other IPs. It's Horde, right? So there's a lot of them. I'll just say straight off the bat, I didn't play Starcraft. When I first met Dave, I remember seeing him play one of the new ones that had come out. And I remember seeing Kerrigan when she got morphed and turned into the queen. And I was like, hell yeah, she looks sick. So I kind of think the Zerg are kind of cool. So I was more than happy to take on this project. So we're gonna take a look at sprues, the miniatures that come in this kit, and see what they look like, because I'm really interested to see the quality and how we put them together. So let's go ahead and do that. So first off, I'm going to talk a little bit about the sprues and actually building these models as a whole. And the first thing I noticed when looking at the instructions and the sprues themselves is everything is numbered and it's super clear on what is what. Not only does it say at the very top corner what sprue numbers you need in order to build these models, it also says quite clearly the letter and number that you need in order to build them, as well as little symbols to indicate parts to not glue and what the options are to make different models. With these Zerglings in particular, you can build them 3 different ways. The kit allows you to make 12 of these Zerglings, as well as 6 of the Raptors and 6 of the Swarmlings. The only difference between the Zerglings and then the Raptors and Swarmlings is this really cool transparent sprue. Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
What's wrong?
I'm filming.
Oh, I'll leave you to it. What are you doing? Just talking about how you build it.
Yes.
Do you like it? Do you think it's a cool kit?
I do, yeah.
I like the fact that they just sort of said, hey, we're going to do transparent sprue, and
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. Like the fact that you're going to paint over that, it's going to be the same end result, but you can use the transparent parts like for the wings. It's
Yeah.
cool.
No, that's okay. Now, I think this is a really cool feature because it's still made out of plastic at the end of the day. So when you put a base coat down, it's still gonna look exactly the same as when you used the plastic sprues to make the other half of the body. Or you can have the option of leaving these off or masking them depending on the look that you wanna go for. Maybe you want these half see-through swarmlings that you can see the insides to. There's some really cool options here, and I think this was an awesome idea. Something else I've noticed is the arrows that indicate what is what. So for example, if I'm looking for A1, there is an arrow pointing to which direction A1 is. Building so many Warhammer kits over the years, I find that sometimes it can be really confusing on what part is what, especially when it's not super clear on the instructions on what it looks like. So I think this is really nice that someone's clearly taken the time to just add that little bit of extra care to make sure that you don't mess up your models and cut out the wrong part of your sprue. Cleaning up and putting these guys together was super easy. Everything fit really seamlessly, especially the transparent resin parts. I thought that they actually fitted in quite nicely and it was really satisfying to put them together. I of course glued everything in with plastic glue and waited for it to dry. I did my first squad of Zerglings first and then moved on to the Raptors and the Swarmlings. wings. So for the raptors, I decided to keep their wings off so I could keep that purple transparent plastic off, because I think I want to keep this in their design when painting them up. And that's pretty much it. These guys are done, built, ready to be painted, and I think they look absolutely sick. The designs are really nice. I love them. I kind of like the purple on them as well. When painting them up, I'm going to experiment a little bit more and keep this purple in there. I want to try and make them really vibrant, because Zerg in a lot of the art and games are very beige, millennial depression, and I think that we can make something a lot cooler than that.
For those who prefer 3D printing their minis, consider checking out our Sisters of the Old Blood launch page. This is our next line of minis after our first one, the Kindred of the Abyss, for our new Tabletop Miniatures world. This will be launching in about a month, and we're super excited because we're going to be releasing a whole bunch of awesome themed models. We've got some ones in power armor coming. We've got a train, cavalry stretch goals. We've got a lot of really exciting stuff to share. This campaign is produced in-house from our minds, from our creativity, with human artists making it all. No AI was used in the conceptualization of anything. No AI has been used like at all. And it's sculpted by Patrick Keith at Bombshell Minis, who has a long track record and career of making these fantastic female-centric sculpts. It's a super cool project, and it will be at a reasonable price point as well, which I think some STL campaigns fail to do. Supporting this campaign will be the #1 way to keep tabletop time, well, basically going. These miniatures campaigns have been successful in the past, and they really are a core part of how we can operate, and we'd love your support. So go check out the links in the description to go follow the Sisters of the Old Blood. The campaign will be going live in early May, right about the time that my baby is going live, screaming into the world. So hopefully they're both super successful. But if I have a preference, it's the baby. I'm sorry. One of the realities of working on a YouTube channel where you're doing lots of videos is sometimes you don't get to do the thing you want to do. I was not letting that happen with Starcraft. I have a lot of projects on the go right now and deadlines, because of course Jen and I are having a baby and we've got to get some stuff done before then, such as my Titan build. So I've been pulled in every direction with stuff I've been doing, and ultimately Murray and Jen were the ones painting the majority of this, but I could not work on the Starcraft video. Starcraft was such a huge part of my childhood, and it's a game I adore, and these minis are fantastic. So I went over to the painting table and said, guys, I'm painting Raynor. So I'm painting Jim Raynor, who is the leader of the Terran side of the starter box. And I have to say, despite the fact that his official paint scheme is black, there was a big temptation for me to paint him teal. And that's because if you remember the original game, if you played Starcraft 1, Raynor would start off as an allied faction, which has a teal color versus your blue color. So you'd be able to easily see who Raynor is on the battlefield. Now, while he drove a vulture around mostly in the first game, we did get him as a marine a bunch in the second game, and that's the iteration we're painting today. Now, his paint scheme is pretty clearly displayed on a lot of official art. The Hearthstone card, Heroes of the Swarm, as well as his Starcraft 2 depiction, and his armor is black. So I didn't want it to look too dissimilar to the ones Murray's painted, so I used the same foundational technique, a silver zenithal spray over black, and then I used black Templar over the top of contrast paint to establish the core colors of the main suit. However, from here, I could be a little bit more picky, spending a little bit more time putting some scratchy highlights on Raynor and highlighting the silver elements on the armor as well. Now, a big point of question for Raynor for me was where I was putting his sort of coiled snake skeleton logo. He's got that on his shoulder pad, and in the official game model, it's on his left shoulder pad. But then in all the art, it's on his right shoulder pad. On the Hearthstone card, it's on his left shoulder pad. And I'm not sure if this is due to art being flipped. Oftentimes art gets mirrored in the production process or before game releases and just nobody caught it. But it's funny that there is this slightly inconsistent depiction of Raynor's armor. Now, on this model, I actually think it would look better if it was on his left pauldron, because his right pauldron holding the gun is obscured from most viewing angles. But ultimately, I decided to paint it on the right pauldron as it is most commonly depicted there. So the majority of the images I found, it was on that shoulder. But also there's this big scratch on the left one, these huge gouge marks that would have made it hard to do freehand there. With the coily snake done, I could focus on the main focal area of the model, which is of course his face. And Raynor has a bit of a tanned complexion, and his skin tone pushes a tiny bit more into the yellows than some of the paler characters we see in video games. And I think that's because his color palette is evoking the Wild West. Now, of course, Jim Raynor from Starcraft 2 looks so much different from Jim Raynor from Starcraft 1. His monobrow has been shaved, he's grown out his hair, and he's got a goatee now. So I depict all that in the paint job, highlighting up and then using my favorite trick that Murray taught me a couple of years ago, which is to use blue washes on the stubble area. So after you paint paint the skin, you use a blue wash, really thin down, and you can build it up, and it makes a fantastic beard because there's all kinds of grays, blues, and greens in stubble as it pushes through from under the skin, and it just makes for a super realistic beard. With that done, there's very few actual colors or spot details on Raynor. I paint his leather holster brown, I paint some yellow hazard stripes on his gun, but again, they're extremely minor in their complexity and there's not many of them. So overall, it leads to a very dark model where there's a very focused focal area, which is Raynor's face, which in some ways is kind of cool and makes him stand out on the battlefield next to the rest of the Marines. I actually had a treat painting Raynor, and I'm quite excited to see what comes next. As I'm not a big gamer and I'm more of a collector, it's unlikely that I'm going to paint and collect a huge army of Starcraft models, but there's definitely characters and units that if Archon release them, I will totally buy. But as a big Starcraft 1 head who did enjoy Starcraft 2, Brood War is where my heart is. Anything reminiscent of that original game is the stuff I'm going to dive into. A Wraith fighter would be so cool. All right, that's it from me. So let's see Jen paint those Zerg.
With the miniatures all assembled, it was time to move on to painting. And there are a lot of miniatures in the Zerg range, so I definitely had my work cut out for me. Now, when looking at the color scheme for Zerg in Starcraft, they can vary a little bit. There's a lot of brown and more brown and beigey brown, which is a lot of brown. I wanted to try and add a little bit of color into their paint scheme because painting brown is very, very boring. So to combat this, I decided to go ahead and use the Murray method and spray 2 different colors on to introduce some vibrant color into what could be a bland paint scheme. I laid down my black primer just as a base and then sprayed red and blue over the top. The blue I thought would work really well for underlighting these guys, kind of working my way up to a purple eventually with the painting, while the red on top again introduced those browns in, which the Zerg are known for. Because there are so many models to paint in this range and they all pretty much look exactly the same, just with some variants, I think using this method is going to save me so much time in the long run. I don't have to worry about base coating anything, and sure, at the end of the day, I probably could have tried to use just a brown and a purple spray, but this is what we had on hand, and I kind of liked experimenting with different colors to see what I could come up with. Something else to keep in mind was the clear plastic that we had introduced earlier with building these guys. I did mask out some of these areas on some of the models or left off bits entirely, and they came out completely fine, just like the normal plastic would. So moving on to colors, I decided to go with the skin tones first, introducing a purple or maroon color that I'd seen on some of the concept art and I liked a lot. Throughout this entire painting process, I basically just dry brushed everything on. There is a ton of texture on these models, so I didn't have to worry too much about trying to create anything. And again, because there's just so many of them, dry brushing really did save a bunch of time here. I worked with a couple of different purples just to really bring out those tones. I wanted to make sure that the purple or the skin stood out nicely. After my skin tones were established, I moved on to some bone. Again, keeping these in the brighter tones just so that they stood out a little bit more. Once most of the dry brushing was done, I could remove some of the blue tack that I'd used for masking out those clear plastic pieces, and I thought that this looked really, really cool. So if you do pick up the box for yourself, it's something to consider if you do like this look as well. And then I could move on to everyone's favorite, the brown. With a lot of the Zerg concept art and how they look in the game, the brown leans to more of a reddish or orange tone, and there were some really good paints from AK that were a perfect match for this. Again, just dry brushing or overbrushing, a lot of this process really did help. It's very similar to painting what would be a 40k Tyrannid, just making sure that the motion in which I dry brushed really did pick up all of those edges. And it didn't really take that long to have pretty much an army done and looking pretty good too. But I also wanted to put more attention into some of these bigger pieces, specifically Kerrigan. And I was very excited to paint her up, so I saved her to the very last. At this point, I had established what colors I was using and the paint scheme that I wanted to do, and having the foundation down of the aerosols did make this an easier process. I went in and started just dry brushing everything on her. Again, she has a ton of detail, and her face is also really, really pretty as well. Once my colors were in and she looked like she matched with the rest of the Zerg, I went in with a little bit more detail specifically on the face and just bringing out some of those highlights. When looking at concept art, her face is the only part of her that remains a little bit human, while everything else is kind of browny and Zergy. So I wanted to try and put more emphasis and a bit more life into her face specifically. And the very last thing to do on these models was to base them. So I laid down a texture paste, waited for this to dry, and then layered on my grays. Laying down a coat of gray and then dry brushing with a brighter gray on top, just to bring out the stone texture that was already on some of these bases. And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much how I painted this entire army, and I have to say, I'm really happy. I'm really happy with how quickly it all sort of came together. I think it looks really Zerg-like. There is a chance that sometimes when you interpret something from something else, it can look a little bit different or it looks completely off kilter. But I think that these do look like Zerg at the end of the day. And I'm also really happy I could include some color into them as well, because I think painting them entirely brown would have driven me insane. At the end of the day, these models are absolutely gorgeous, and I really do like the clear plastic with the different colors in them as well. Adding on the wings and some of the green spewy things, and knowing I didn't have to paint them too was nice. With everything all painted up, I could hand over to Murray to see what he was up to with painting the Terran.
Now, I have a bit of a game plan when it comes to painting these Marines. They are all mostly predominantly blue. So I'm gonna do something that could turn out really well. I'm sort of taking a bit of a guess here, but I'm gonna start with spraying everything black and then going in with a zenithal of gunmetal silver. This is gonna allow me to do a couple of things. One, have black in the recesses because I'm doing a zenithal, and all the metal bits that are like inside the sort of carapace suit. Two, I'm gonna try something with contrast on the army here. Now bear with me because contrast historically doesn't go very well over large curved body armor, but I think this is gonna work really well because I want these guys to actually feel like really heavy and metallic. So we're gonna go with this and start applying blue all over these models, leaving only those particularly mechanical parts where I want to remain silver. Now the medic's gonna be a little more fiddly. They are white as opposed to anything else, so I'm just gonna go in with the gray. Specifically not white, because white layering is a pain in the butt. Once you go white, you can't really highlight from there, right? You've gone as far up into white as you can go. Now to tie these medics in with the rest of the blue Marines, I'm going to start doing accents with that really nice blue glossiness. I will, however, follow the method of the standard Marines and put some contrast onto the glowing cross here, which was a translucent piece of plastic. And I think this green contrast shows up really well on it. Now for the goop, I don't want any metallic to be showing through here, so I'm gonna paint that a really acidic yellow, and then I'll apply a contrast over the top of that to get that really bright glowing goop effect. And then I've done the Marines and the medics, those two quote-unquote human-sized models, or rather the ones that have the same helmet design. You might have noticed that I haven't painted that yet. I'm going to take a really bright yellow contrast and just apply that straight onto the silver metallic of the helm. Again, this silver is doing wonders in giving this really interesting depth to the contrast here. And I think it really has that sort of NASA punk glowing yellow texture to it. Now, onto the elephant in the room. The, I guess elephant-sized bombardiers? I'm not sure. Once again, seeing what I can do with the contrast here. Again, basically just following the official art because, I mean, it's cool. Nothing wrong with following the official art from time to time. Now, because this black doesn't quite have the same opaque qualities as the blue did, I'm having to be a bit more thick and careful with it. Making sure it doesn't pool too much, but also that it doesn't leave any sort of streak marks that you can get with, you know, large armor panels like these. Then once again, for the accents, I'm gonna go back to that blue that ties all the Terran Marines together and paint in a couple of extra details like the glowing furnace turbines in the top of the jetpack and giving the eyes just a little bit of orange sheen. I don't think I actually filmed the little floaty droid much here because I'm a professional, but also it's painted in exactly the same way. However, I did paint the plumets on using just a little bit of airbrush just to speed up the blending process really. And now for the home stretch, it's time to paint all the bases. To match the aesthetic of Starcraft, that sort of lunar landscape, we're gonna go with gray because one, matches that war-torn vibe of Starcraft, but two, that neutral gray is really going to elevate the colors of these models that we're painting, allowing them to stand out and, you know, pop more. Something that's really good to keep in mind whenever you're basing your own armies. So a simple base coat of a dark gray followed by a dry brush onto the texture, and these are looking pretty good. Slap down again, another strong pink contrast onto these crystals, once again going straight over the silver zenithal that we established at the start, giving it just that extra bit of sheen. All in all, these models were actually a pleasure to paint. A lot of detail, but not too many different things to paint. By which I mean there's not an absolutely ridiculous amount of accessories of different textures. You have enough to keep it interesting and create character and nuance for each of the models, but they're not so overloaded with detail that you sort of lose your mind. It's time to give a lick of paint to the rims of the bases here to neaten it all up for a little photo shoot. So let's see how these all turned out in some sexy reveals.
If you are a patron of Tabletop Time, you are the reason my food is on the table. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. And if you'd like to continue supporting Tabletop Time, consider joining the Patreon. We do a monthly mini review and we also occasionally do interesting things. We do behind the scenes videos, and like when the Adepticon Reels came out, we did a whole reaction video to that. So if you want to see that kind of content, it's just for patrons. Join up, links are in the description. What a mission. Well done, guys. Look at this.
Ta-da!
They look awesome. I love it. This is very tempting to play this game. Oh, we have. And there'll be a battle report out next week. So if you want to watch the battle report, stay tuned. We're really excited. We've actually done some stuff with this battle report that's really experimental with like stop motion. So yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. It was a really fun game Murray and I played, and I won't give you any spoilers, but I think this is a pretty good starter box.
Yeah, it's decent. You get some variety and some little guys, and
It's not the cheapest starter box on the planet, but it's no more expensive than Games Workshop ones. In fact, I think it is a bit cheaper than Games Workshop's big boxes.
well, I think the difference is you actually get like a starting size force with this.
Yeah, I mean in terms of points, right? Because the game seems to play with slightly less models on the table. You also get terrain, and you also get a playmat, like a fold-out playmat. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a relevant amount of stuff. You get everything you need straight off the bat.
If I was a Starcraft fan, which I am, you know what? I would be buying this. Also, I have to say, I would probably get the Protoss pack because I was always a Protoss and Terran player. The Zerg, not my jam. Mostly because in StarCraft 1, they don't get a big, cool flying unit. And in StarCraft 1, I use battle cruisers and carriers all the time for like the final game push because it's fun and I have ship autism. But yeah, anyway, hopefully you enjoyed the video and got something useful out of it. A bit different from other people's coverage because our video is a bit late. And we'll see you in next week's video.
Bye! Subscribe for the battle report. Yeah.
You don't have a mic on, so they can't hear you when you don't talk if I'm not pointing the mic at you.
They know. Oh, vomit ASMR.